Welcome to this Touchpoint RoundTable event, which coincides with the publication of the most recent issue of Touchpoint on the topic of service design with the planet in mind. I'm happy to say that as a conference participant, you can download an exclusive teaser of this issue at the SDN's exhibitor booth here in Brella. It contains a selection of articles from the issue, as well as some relevant ones from our archive. SDN members, of course, have free access to the issue, which we've published online. The 5 authors who are joining us today are among more than 17 who contributed to the theme of this issue. They'll be joining on the stage today, and the moderator will be Agusta Callaway, who is one of our guest editors on the issue. She's active in this topic of sustainability as well. During this roundtable, you'll be hearing short presentations from 5 of the authors present, who will share their thoughts related to the articles that they've contributed. At the end of the author presentations, Agusta will take over the roundtable discussion. And to finish off this hour that we've got together, I'm going to return and select a few questions from the audience to ask of the authors. So during this event, please use the Q&A feature to pose your questions and upvote those that you find are interesting. So to begin the event, I'd like to introduce who's here around our virtual roundtable. To begin with, I'm Jesse Grimes. I'm the editor-in-chief of Touchpoint. As I mentioned, Agusta Callaway was one of our guest editors. She's a senior consultant at Cambria Solutions and who brings her deep experience to this topic to her role as guest editor. Zeynep Falay van Flittner is a principal service designer and partner at Hellon, and she focuses on our organization's sustainability transitions. Then you'll be hearing from Ben Reason, a founding partner of LiveWork, who's also advising his clients on designing for sustainable futures. Yulya Besplemennova is a service designer and a researcher at Oblo and a scientific coordinator of the Service Design Tools platform. And she's currently applying a speculative design approach to planetary transformations. 2 more of our speakers. Joost van Leewen works for Coast Service Design here in Amsterdam, where I'm speaking from, and his work aims to accelerate the transitions towards a sustainable society. And lastly, Remco Lenstra is founder and CEO of Reframed BV and academic director of business design thinking at the Antwerp Management School. And he's worked to integrate the UN Sustainable Development Goals into an actionable framework. I'd like to hand the floor now to Zeynep to be the first of our authors to speak and to share her thoughts. So Zeynep, take it away.
Thank you, Jesse. I'm sharing now my slide. Yes, greetings from Helsinki. So I will talk about our article about envisioning desirable futures, and I will introduce you one game we have designed. But first, I would like to introduce myself. So my name is Zeynep Falay van Flittner. I use to pronounce she and her. And I have over 15 years of experience as a design leader, started as an industrial designer, spent 10 years of my career in the beginning around UX and digital transformations. And then last 6 years, I've been mostly focusing on service design and customer experience. And last couple of years, more and more on sustainability and transition design. And we've been writing this article with 4 authors, Kirsika, Sonia, and Anna. We are all working at Hellon Service Design Agency located in Helsinki and London. And now I'll just get to one of the key points. But actually, maybe it's interesting to start with how this whole game started. So we, as Hellon, have been lucky to be part of a EU-funded research project called Creatures. And this is initiated by Aalto University in Finland. And there is this group of research organizations in Europe being part of it, as well as group of creative practices. The main aim of the Creatures research is to understand the role of creative practices for future transformational futures. And it's a 3-year program where the creative teams are putting up some experiments. And there are also some NGOs and more artistic groups, and Hellon is maybe the closest to business and design. And then the researchers are participating in these experiments, observing, collecting data, and analyzing and trying to come up with some conclusions around this. We are coming to the end of the second year of this project. And last year will be a lot about synthesis, all the data and publications. So as part of this project, we have decided to develop another game we have done earlier at Hellon around Nordic mobility futures into a more to the next level, because as you know, many design agencies are usually bounded with the client paid projects. So this EU funded research project actually gave us quite a nice extra time to really explore, like, how can we take this previously designed game further. And what we have done is we removed the mobility aspect of it and integrated UN sustainability goals, but some of the original logic stayed. And so I will now explain how it goes. And it is the idea of this game is to facilitate co-visioning of desirable futures with participants. And the first part of the game, by the way, we play this either in digital. Because of the COVID, we have to transform everything last 2 years to the digital. We've been playing this in Myra board, but we have also designed a real physical cardboard that we can play in physical space. And the game guides the participants to write this fictional story about 2030. And fiction writing as a methodology with the participants. And then also we are utilizing these SDGs to bring in some of the kind of UN sustainability goals, how they have actually accomplished in this fictional story that we are writing together. And one of the most important elements is to focus on desirability. We've been playing this with sustainability experts, business leaders, designers, and many times in organizations, a lot of the discussions are about what has to be done, what can be done, what is kind of profitable, feasible. But we feel there is too little discussions about what kind of society we would like to live in, where do we want to go. So this tool, we felt, makes that bridge and brings an opportunity to think a little bit more openly. In the second part of the game, we start to look at we do backcasting, and we look at, okay, well, we have written a story, and then this is a desirable story by the players. What prevents us to go there in 10 years? And with a bit more solution-oriented mindset in the second part of the game, we try to identify critical challenges and barriers against this desirable future and try to come up with some concrete idea, suggestions, what can be done today to address those barriers against the desirable future. It's currently a 3 hours process, but it can be actually stretched much longer if you want to go a bit more thorough. So it's quite a flexible workshop process. So yeah, so as I said, there's a lot of data being collected around this. We've been organizing, and our idea was to utilize this with businesses and part of maybe strategy processes or as an employee engagement tool. But then there's more and more you know, maybe findings will come next year once the project is coming to an end. And but as the designers who participated in this creation and also facilitation of these game sessions, we identified these 3 needs that are interesting for the organizations to transform towards sustainability and create how service design can help. One is about this mindset shift, about triggering imagination and helping people to think alternative ways out. The second is a lot about organizational shift and giving these tools to organizations to engage their employees and enable behavioral change. And the third one is more the systemic shift to think actually more holistically across organizations. So this was my quick intro to the topic. Hopefully we have good questions afterwards, and I give you back the word, Jesse.
Thank you, Zeynep. I'll quickly hand it over to Ben to share his contribution.
Thanks, Jesse. I'm going to start with a little anecdote. I saw a tweet by Cameron Tonkinwise, who's a design professor in Australia, and he was referring to a few design conferences, a bit like this one. I think one was IXDA, where the topics were sustainability or planetary design or global justice, and he was kind of musing on whether a lot of those designers are going to go back to a day job, which is very different from the discussion that they're having at the conference. And it got me thinking about this this kind of tricky thing that we're all dealing with, where we're sort of between worlds. We know that we need to build that future that Zeynep was sort of talking about, but we also kind of exist in a kind of regular paradigm of business as usual. And on top of that, for people like me who've been doing this for a while, we've put a lot of kind of our heart and soul into making the case that service design is good for business, right? We've sort of told people, and it's been a struggle. So I was sort of empathizing with, myself and the community and the team at Live Work, and just thinking, what's the pragmatics? How do you make that step from that case that sort of, customer experience is a good thing when it's not anymore? You can't just lean on that. We have to sort of recognize that customer-centric logic is missing a whole load of stuff, which is basically more important. And for example, it would be quite normal to say that an online retail experience should have a really smooth returns policy because that's good customer experience, it's frictionless, da 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 da. But we learn that half that stuff goes straight to landfill. It doesn't go back on the shelves. It doesn't go back in. We're creating a huge amount of waste, a huge amount of road miles, all that kind of thing. So, like, how do you kind of go from start to incorporate some of that into and challenge the kind of the dominant mindset that we've worked quite hard to kind of build up? So I think what we've said in our piece is common with other people in the Touchpoint article, which is, looking positively. Design has a whole load of things that are kind of super valuable if we can get people to see in the transition. What we see with a lot of organizations is, they are quite capable of recognizing at a strategic board level that there's a problem. They can set long-term goals, but that business as usual thing that we're plugged into is hard to turn, and that you need creativity, you need the frameworks for thinking about change and engaging across different parts of the organization, the tools for transformation that others have mentioned in their pieces. So that's the kind of hypothesis, and what we've done particularly in this piece is sort of focus on, okay, so if you are in that world of customer experience, let's say your clients are kind of, that's what they're buying, what can you do? What's the step that you can make? And I was inspired by some work we saw from a team at IAG in, again, Australia, insurance company with Harriet Wakelam, where they'd taken their organization's personas and cast them 10 years into the future and said, what's their world like? What are they dealing with? And one of their personas is a small farmer out in Australia, and that farmer is dealing with climate change and dealing with regulatory change and dealing with migration and things like that. So they were able to use these future customers to talk to the business about what they're going to need to adapt to on a more pragmatic and practical way. That farmer is going to need a different set of insurance products or not insurance at all, and it was the ability, I guess, to go from the kind of helicopter view of a net zero target to something that is strategic and long term, but tangible, and that you can engage you know, specific lines of business in and things like that. So that's kind of the hypothesis, and that's, I think, the suggestion to find a way to step into that future. So what we've started to do at Live Work, or the team have started to do, not me, is to talk to those clients that they have now and say, let's just take some time out and let's have a look at some of these issues that we don't normally consider in the day-to-day work, and let's just, you know, start to think about where our customers are going in the future, and let's try and define the prototype first step together. So that's the kind of the gist. And in relation to take a stand, I think, you know, someone has to make that first step and say, let's talk about this. Maybe we do it outside of the project. Maybe we, you know, we've been offering a session just to take them through, and we've been using the donut model from Kate Rayworth to do so. So thanks for having me, and I'll hand over to my next panel member.
Okay, yes, and that would be Yulya. So Yulya, please share what you've been putting into the article.
Hello, I'm Yulya Besplemennova, service designer at Oblong, using she, her pronouns. And my article for this Touchpoint issue is called Introducing Planetary to Design. I'm always interested in the development of the discipline, and in 2020 that brought me to join the terraforming think tank of Strelka Institute in Moscow, where a very speculative approach to research is focusing on designing more viable planetary conditions. Since I got back to my daily practice after that, I've noticed how much the word planet became common in design discourse being used by the leading consultancies. And this latest issue of Touchpoint is, of course, an example of that. But my concern is that planet as a word is often used as a kind of more fresh way to talk about sustainability and substitute nature and environment in discussions. While I personally believe that designing with the planet in mind requires proper understanding of all implications of planet as a concept. We currently see the consequences of building human-centered design on a flawed picture of a human as a static, rational, separated individual mastering nature, instead of the scientifically correct image of interconnected, dynamic, constantly changing entity whose actions are impacted by myriads of other species and events from micro to macro scales. So not to repeat the same mistake, I think we need to learn more on how to approach the planet in a way that can advance our discipline and minimize consequences of its misunderstanding. So in the article, I talk a bit about history of something we can call planetary awareness, or understanding the true nature of our relations to the physical reality of planet, and substituting the idea of Earth just as a ground for our subjective worlds, or abstract uniform globe of the past century capitalism. And I focus on some points to consider when designing for planet. To summarize it for this very brief talk, I want to point out, first of all, that planetary doesn't always mean planetary scale, as also the globalism is planetary scale, but it's more about the reconfiguration of human-planet relations in which we fully perceive our embeddedness in the planetary system. So as any other organism on Earth, we are literally made of planetary matter, and are changing it with all our activities throughout our lives simply by breathing, eating, performing all other metabolic processes. But as humanity in its whole, we also got to a level of geologic force that nowadays has the biggest impact on the planet. And a call to action to take a stand here is for us to become a responsible part of a planetary system, not just any part. So for me, it implies to stop thinking of a planet as a synonym to environment or something external to us, to which we can relate from a side, but see how we're fully immersed in it. I think that it is not much constructive to apply our old paradigm of necessary centering on something and talk about planet-centered design, as it implies that design is somewhere apart from the planet and can get centered on it. But I would suggest probably a planetary embodied design that is acknowledging the depth of our interconnectedness with all the systems and the disorienting perspective of the absence of any arbitrary center. I also think that rather than centering on the planet and therefore looking at it from a side, we need to look from our planet outwards to understand its own cosmic context and so far apparently lifeless universe, which makes the perception of existential risks that we are causing to life on Earth far more scary and hopefully also mobilizing. So we need to learn to use the power of humanity becoming this geologic force in a deliberate way that doesn't focus only on sustainability for humans, but on inhabitability of the planet for complex life in general. And there are people who, like Earl Ellis, believe that the prospects for Anthropocenes much better than the one that we are now creating are very real. And so we need to direct our design attempts to implement them. So when I was writing the article, I still haven't a clear vision of where this could start for service design. But now I believe that we can start by designing services that, first of all, respect the reality of closed system of resources that we have available, that respect the heterogeneity and diversity of all kinds in different places on Earth, instead of applying just unified solutions, and that are helping us to reconfigure the relations with other actors in planetary system, making them more horizontal and equal, and not just serving the human needs. So you can find more about this in the article, and feel free to contact me for any discussion on the subject. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Yulya. And Joost, I'd like you to take the stage, please, as well.
Thanks a lot. Do you remember ever making Legos and then building this one car from your Legos, and when you were fed up with it, you could make another car, you could make a truck out of this one car? It's exactly that we need to do with our society at this point. We need to make this linear car, first built, turn it into a circular one, which is one of the challenges that we are facing as a planet, planet right now. Yulya, sorry for using it that way. And that's exactly what I want to be talking about, because our society is like this Lego kit. Unfortunately, unlike these Lego kits, we don't have a manual. We have no clue how to get from the linear to this circular model. We don't even know really what it looks like yet. But I have good news, or at least I have a thesis that we as service designers can make that manual. And I want to show you how we can do that. I have a case to show. For the municipality of Apeldoorn, together with a big group of stakeholders, we looked into how to make the renovation of the public space circular, how to make the material streams in that instance circular. And we used a service design process to do that. Now, I'm not going to be talking about it too much because we have a very well put together video to show you. And I'm going to show you the video and then bring out some brief details I want to show you after. So if my mouse cooperates.
And renovate. This is necessary to keep public spaces livable and to respond to new developments. But what happens to the old material? Let's take a look at this brick, for example. In theory, this brick could perfectly well be reused, but that rarely ever happens in practice. Despite goodwill, people within the municipality face complex processes with many stakeholders and are facing financial restrictions. That's why we took a closer look at these processes together with the involved stakeholders, and it turned out that reuse is possible. By using a new combination of techniques, data on materials can be collected and added to existing databases. By making this data available to trading platforms, a new use can be found for this brick. By adding these innovations in the current construction and renovation process of municipalities, we learned that the solution to a circular way of working does not lie within one construction project, but can be found in the larger picture of material flows. Linking this to the municipality's multi-year plans, it becomes clear when materials will be available for reuse. New uses can be found for each material, and a new project can be realized with previously used materials. If all municipalities take part, we can make circularity a success. That's why we have developed tools that municipalities can use to take the first steps in getting started with circularity themselves. Are you curious about these examples, or do you want to get started yourself? Take a look at our website.
Yes, so in this process, together with all these stakeholders, we created an overview of how they could get from a linear to a circular model in working together. It was a very concrete case into how we as service designers can help. And one very important thing that I want to show you right now is the tool that we use. Of course, this is just one tool. It's not the tool, but it shows you how we can visualize the data that we gather from interviews and from other means of empathizing, and share that in a way that actually large group of stakeholders can work with it. This is what we call the process journey. So it's the journey of the process that they go through on in road renovations or just any renovation in the public space. And you can see all the interactions. It's a linear process, of course, because time is linear, but yeah, you can see all the interactions that people have among these stakeholders have in this process. And we could identify circular interventions. The white dots are things that they could add or change in this process to make this current linear process a circular one, which made it very insightful for everyone to then put their shoulders behind, underneath and start doing it. We're piloting it right now in the municipality. Hopefully next year there will be results. And this is how this journey and this process can create a manual for how to get from a linear to a circular model. In doing so, we notice a couple of things though. Us as service designers, we're getting a little bit of a different role simply because we're not bringing the knowledge of the user, of the customer in the middle. We're more of a facilitator of all the expertises in the at the table. We dive way deeper into the operation of all these stakeholders, which means that we need to get to know all their jargon and language, and their we need to get way deeper into the weeds to do something like this. Processes are longer and there's more bureaucracy with all these stakeholders involved, but there's also a lot more impact to be gained. If we can get, as designers, can get as deep in the organization as we did in this project, and we're doing in more projects like this, then we can really make an impact on a level that's, that's gonna impact the world in a bigger way than simply customer experience. We are writing a white paper about this, which you can get notified about if you go to servicedesign4sustainability.com. We're really stoked about this. We'd love to have more discussion on this, simply because we need to have discussion about this and we don't know everything ourselves. If you're interested, please go to the website and let us know. And we'll share with you when more information is there. And let's build this, this beautiful Cybertruck together and make a manual doing so. Thanks, and I'd love to see some questions.
Thank you, Joost. And Remco, you're the last author, so please share.
I will share my screen and hope that it will work, because it's not always working the way it should be. Okay, good evening or afternoon, depending on where you are. So I'm Remco, and I'm an industrial designer by education, but I work in a business school at this moment, basically mostly doing design thinking education to businesses, really trying to get design thinking skills embedded in organizations, mostly in conjunction to change projects or transformations. So basically, I think the community, the design community, knows that the skill set of design thinking is a very nice enabler and catalyst for change within companies, and especially in let's say these transformational times where lots of new technologies come, lots of changes are coming, where we all want to somehow transform towards more sustainable business models. This is what I try to do on a daily basis. And I have my own private company, basically trying to consult companies and to teach them these design skills. But I also am connected to several business schools. I'm an academic director at Antwerp Management School, and this is a very deliberate choice, because the multidisciplinarity that we need to grow, I can find within these academic institutions, trying to bridge the gap between, let's say, the academic knowledge and the practical application in the field of the academic knowledge. And I am lucky enough that in Antwerp Management School, there is a very extensive knowledge base and a chair on sustainability. And in combination with this chair on sustainability, combining with the design thinking approach, can sometimes yield surprising results. So, a couple of years ago, I was involved in a project on exponential transformation. I was trying to develop some toolkits to help people think about exponential transformation. It was the first time I got really into the developing, let's say, a purpose for organizations. I was very intrigued by this, and over the next couple of years, I've been really working on trying to somehow work with the concept of purpose within innovation. And I very quickly came to a toolkit that somehow tried to envision, to build a vision on society using the Sustainable Development Goals. Sustainable Development Goals as they were developed by the United Nations and as they were also presented in the other presentation of Zeynep is a very nice framework to try and adhere to, as we are all trying to contribute to this concept of a better world. And sometimes having a framework of these 17 different wars that we can work on is a very useful toolkit. But what we also do is that we try to project ourselves 20, 30 years into the future, and we try to imagine what kind of society do we want to contribute to. But I also combine this with, let's say, technological development. And I try to when you see technology roadmaps and you combine them with the sustainability development goals, and as a designer you close your eyes, then you start to see new worlds emerging. It's one of the skill sets of a designer is that they can envision the possibilities of technology in a scenario and into a future. And this is what we use. One of a very well-known quote is that when we are in technological, very demanding times, it's often the design industry that is able to envision how this world would look like. And we've seen this in the space age, but we also see this now in digital transformation and stuff like that. So when we are talking about massive transformative purposes, basically the concept is that we try to construct massive transformative purposes by having a very elaborate discussion on what are the sustainable development goals that we as a team want to contribute to, and also what are the technologies that are going to have an impact on our sector. And based on these two elements, and a lot of talking and a lot of discussion, we construct a vision of the future, and we construct also a very succinct, let's say, purpose statement. This, for example, is one for a hearing aid company that basically says hearing is a human right. And this might be a purpose statement. Now, it's all nice and well to develop all these kinds of purpose statements, but what we soon find out is that it is very easy to top down to start imagining all kinds of purpose statements. But sometimes it's really difficult to create the possibilities for people to really align their actions and their projects with this high-level purpose statements that we have designed. So while we were implementing very elaborate toolkits, we have several of them that really top-down build a purpose and build roadmaps to contribute to reach this societal future. We found out that once we get to a certain level within a company, and this company is different and this level is different in any company, at a certain moment there is some kind of a divide. It's typical in change that when you start implementing something top down, that at a certain moment it has to be fed from the bottom up. And we found that we were lacking tools to actually achieve this. So what we decided to do was that we would turn the toolkits that we had, we would turn them around, and we would try to design a toolkit that would enable people that are working in projects to align their daily actions and their projects with this big goal in the sky that a lot of companies have. But we wanted to teach them how they could, from their current context, connect and align with this bigger goal. And for this, we have developed a toolkit and a very simple template that looks a little bit like this. And in the Touchpoint article that has been published, there is a complete manual of this tool, but also I've shared a Miro board in the Touchpoint article that links to with a manual and the templates in it. But basically, what we try to do is that we use laddering as a technique, and we start in the corner with the current services and the current team that is working on a product, and we ask them why a couple of times from internal perspective, from an external perspective, and from a societal perspective. We ask them what the reason of existence is of the current products or services. Then we ask them to construct strategies, to voice strategies that might help us to even better reach these goals. So that's the how part. And then we say, well, listen, if this is your massive transformative purpose that we have constructed using the SDGs and this technology development, and we use this technology also as a timeline in the development over the next 30 years, because technology is one of the more predictable ways to put anchor points into future scenarios. So when we put these technologies on a timeline between now and 30 years, and when we have these 3 levels of abstraction of why, from an internal perspective, from an external perspective, and from a societal perspective, we can now start brainstorming about what actions, products, services we could develop or take that might be conducive to reaching these sustainability development goals. And this is the essence of the tool. We are trying to enable people to build up scenarios from now, but connect them with this constructed future. So we are trying to give the teams that are doing the projects the possibility to bridge the gap between project and purpose. And this from a bottom-up approach instead of implementing it top-down. So basically, we look where the vacuum is in the company from between the top-down and the bottom-up approach, and then we use this tool to let the bottom-up approach be enabled to bridge this gap. And this is the essence of this tool. Of course, it's a little bit more complicated than that, so I suggest you start reading the article. But the essence of this tool is basically that we empower people to connect what they are doing right now with the purpose of the company and where they want to go. And this is about all I wanted to contribute at this moment. And maybe we can start having a discussion also about this.
Perfect, yes, that's just the time for this. So Agusta, you can now grill our authors and have a discussion on what you've been hearing.
Wonderful. Well, my first question for you all, and I'll, whoever wants to answer can answer. That's the way my questions will be. I'm curious about your personal inspiration of sort of approaching this topic. Did you have any key moments, aha moments, where you were like, you know, something has to change. We need to take a stand on this issue. We need to be doing more. We need, you know, that manual that Joost was talking about, or, you know, as Remco was saying, like designers can see the future. Like we need to do something more. Just curious, in your personal story, is there any specific event or person that helped you, push you into this direction?
If I can respond directly, because my mic is still open. Well, basically, for me, it's the tool is born out of frustration, and also probably the growth path of facilitating these sessions. In the beginning, as a facilitator, you become an enabler, and the knowledge is in the room, as Joost said. But sometimes, even when the knowledge is in the room, the goals are not reached because of this divide that they cannot cross. And then we need to script or design the conversation for the people in the room so that they can channel their knowledge and they can actually reach the goal. So for me, the frustration was the knowledge is in the room and we cannot seem to get this connection. How can I design a conversation that enables people from the project to connect to the strategic part. And this is the reason, pure frustration that I didn't reach the goals I wanted to reach, because it was not my place to force. It had to be enabled from the bottom.
Right. Wonderful. Thank you. Any other suggestions or comments on how your work came to be?
Maybe I can give you one quick comment, so there's room also for others to talk. I have participated in this transition design training 3-4 years ago, and it really kind of made me realize that how actually design could be applied to wicked problems. And then I've been studying much more about different schools around the design for sustainability transitions, and also started to kind of have actually much more critical lens to my own profession. Coming from industrial design, and UX has been continuously applied to increase consumption, sell more products with desirability, etc. And I started to feel that, okay, we are a big part of this mess as designers, and then now we need to really switch our minds to figure out how we clean the mess. So that's why I'm also like nowadays full-time focusing on this topic.
Wonderful. Thank you. Anyone else want to comment on this question?
Well, I can add one more. I used to be I studied product design, and I got in touch with the circular economy, and that actually made me look into service design way more, realizing that we don't need to make new plastic shit. I'm sorry for my French, but I mean it. And we need to look into services, and we need to look into ways to use design thinking for other purposes, for more abstract purposes, at least for a start. And that's also how I got in touch with, I think it was This is Human-Centered Design podcast that talked about how you can change big systems by getting multiple stakeholders at the table and like working with them together, listening to their needs in the same way as you do a customer. That inspired me, and a couple of years later when this project came by, I just jumped on the opportunity to do the same thing and to see the strength of the methodology with my own eyes. So it was a bit of a multi-sided answer, but that would be my inspiration for it.
Great. And Ben, I believe you have an answer for us.
Yeah, this stuff has been kind of in me since for 20 years, since we started Live Work, but it kind of like, this is quite a personal talk because it took a back seat in a way, you know. It was, and then 3 years ago, I found myself with my partner and my 3-year-old sitting on a bridge with Extinction Rebellion, and it was just like, you've got to get your act together and do your bit. And at the same time had a whole lot of younger Live Workers saying, what's our role, what do we do? So it's like, it's urgency and fear, I think.
Yeah, I can share my take on that also. I'm also coming from industrial design background, and I really remember the moment when I read the famous Papanik book saying that, there are worse professions than product design, but maybe not many of them. And then I switched to service design. But since a while, I'm also realizing that also services have really large impact on the planet and the systems that we are living. As no service is really material actually, and especially the digital ones, they also have some consequences both in terms of emissions and also especially the effects on the society. And so of course that is mobilizing you to start thinking about bigger picture and what you should be doing.
Wonderful. So my next question is, I want to get this right, and it actually circles back to you, Yulya. You said we need to understand and respect the true nature, something to that effect, the true nature of our relationships. So think about that phrase, the true nature of our relationships. And I'd also like you to think about the phrase nature as a stakeholder, which was mentioned in Kat Drew's opening keynote this morning. So those that notion of a stakeholder and nature and relationships and humans and planet. Where do you fall on this issue? So I know for me personally, I really feel like we need to be designing ourselves back into nature. I think that's like the key thing. And I came to this world through organic farming and seeing and studying natural ecosystems. So I'm just curious what those two thoughts and two concepts of, you know, our true relationships and nature as a stakeholder brings up for you guys. So who wants to go first?
Well, I can, proceed based on what I said before. So first of all, I think also nature is quite a difficult concept, of course, because so much of it is actually artificial and based on what humans did in the past thousands of years. And when I'm talking about really, when the true nature, I think exactly as you're saying that to design us back into it, but maybe, back to the planet in terms that I was saying exactly that, not seeing it as something separate from us, but that we are completely embedded in it and that we really need to understand it and see ourselves as just one big system, and that we need to design it from within and not as the external observers. I think that's the most important part for me.
Go ahead. Zeynep.
Me? Okay. So well, I think when I started to talk about several years ago about having non-human stakeholders in the consideration, or for example, having personas around unborn children or a child who will be born in the future, I think everybody hearing these comments immediately relates and likes it. So I never saw resistance. No, this is not kind of important. But I think the biggest problem is the current business paradigms have absolutely no role because they are not affecting short-term business goals as it's written today. And this conflict, I think, postponed adaptation of this type of thinking so much. And now we are in a turning point because of, a lot of pressures that are actually visibly happening, plus all these policy changes and legislations. Now, first time we have a room to include these non-human stakeholders in the design process, even though they are not maybe supporting short-term business targets. So I think that has been the kind of mindset shift that should have happened much earlier. But let's build on this wave at least.
So anyone else want to comment on that one? Are you talking, Ben? You're on mute.
There was one of the references I've been using to think about this is this philosopher Timothy Morton, who actually argues that the concept of nature is the problem. That because we externalize to Yulya's point, we think that we're not part of it. So they actually, it built into our language are these kind of issues. And my other kind of thing about this relationships and this sort of idea of BAU is, the other thing about design I find is that we think that we can kind of quite smoothly describe a future and then kind of organize our way towards it. And we just need to get everyone on board. But I'm kind of concerned that the future is going to happen to us a lot more in ways that we don't predict, like we've just experienced over the last year and a half. And it's going to be a very different kind of relationship. And the idea of nature as a stakeholder is quite kind of tame in a way. Like nature's going to be a bit of an activist, I would say, in this, and it's going to kind of come and get us. So we've got to be. Well, I'm quite. This is what the, that kind of future customers thing. If you push it out, is people are going to be in different situations where life has changed not as they planned it, and that's my kind of biggest question for design, is like, how do you get into that more volatile space and still kind of keep your feet on the ground and know what to do? That's my provocative point for today.
And Joost, I see you're unmuted, so.
Yeah, maybe to add to that, because I agree fully with what Ben said, that nature is a staple. It feels a little bit like what we did, having an empty chair for the customer in the corner, so that you know the reduced to this small thing, which when in fact nature and definition is also a thing, but it's just everything. I'd say that and now I kind of lost my point there. Nope, I think I lost it. I'll come back to it if I get it, but it's not there anymore. So it's back to you. Sorry,
actually, guys. It's back to Jesse. He's got some questions for the audience. Thank you.
Thanks,
all.
Agusta.
Okay, thanks, Agusta. Actually, before I get to the ones from the audience, and I can see that we've got some questions coming in Umbrella, and please keep them coming and upvote ones that you think are interesting. That'll help me in choosing some of them. I've got Joost. It's come back to you. Go ahead.
I think it'll come back. I think instead of having nature as a stakeholder, it should be like the first check. So does this fall in line with the whole, with nature as a whole? And then we proceed with whatever project we're figuring out. So not having it as one seat at the table with just one vote, but having the veto at the start or the end of a project, or something we want to embark in, and then run if it fits the bill. I think that would be a way better place for nature to be positioned in a project like this.
Great.
Thanks for being able to come back on that.
No problem. So actually, I've got a question of the audience, of the panel first, before I get to the audience questions. If you're a service designer and you need to make the case for this sustainability issue and tell your client or your employers that you need to design with nature in mind, with the planet in mind, that job might be easier if you're working in a sector like fashion or petrochemicals or energy or transport, where there's a real demand from the clients, from even the consumer side. But what if you're in the position of an agent of a sector or an industry that may not be so quickly associated with the sustainability impact, and you might have a more difficult time to build that case? Is that an issue, first of all? And if it is an issue, how do you build the case in those situations? Zeynep, I think you have I saw you shaking.
Yeah, first of all, fashion and the industries that you gave the examples, I think when we look about sustainable conscious customers who make their purchase decisions with sustainability considerations, we are still looking to a very small percentage. Majority of the customers, almost in every industry, are making with price and quality driven decisions. So there's huge amount of struggles of the companies, and this is not even like service designer per se, just one person, but actually as an organization to find the argument against its shareholders, especially when they are publicly owned, to invest in sustainability transitions instead of growth. Because right now they start to a little bit take its other change, and companies are being sued because they are doing the right thing. So it's really interesting, and I fully agree this, everything should go hand in hand with policy makers and activisms, and really almost like there should be legal battles around understanding like these dynamics of the role of shareholders and this kind of sustainable support. So I think it's not just service designer, but we need to find of course, it's easy for service designers to connect to a customer value as a positive sustainability topic. And that bridge actually gives really good argument for the business decisions to be made. So I think we can empower businesses to accelerate these decisions, connecting to customer need.
Sure, okay. Is there anyone else in the panel have a technique that designers, people in the audience might be successful with if they want to apply that kind of pressure?
Well, first of all, one thing that I might want to point out is that sustainability goes beyond only the environmental aspect. Sustainability is also about the social aspect. And sometimes people narrow it down a little bit too much, and sometimes when you expand it to the social and the sustainable and the environmental topics, you find a way in that by expanding the conversation a little bit more, you can find a way in to have this conversation.
And then there is a question from the audience as well, which has to do with building the case that these sustainability issues should be considered, even though they're longer term. And for a company who's maybe concerned with more short-term issues like profits, you might find yourself struggling to get the attention of long-term issues. So is there any advice from yourselves on how to kind of reframe it and make these long-term, decades, even hundreds of years issues much more pressing so that the work takes place? Joost, maybe I could even kind of pick on you. You've been working for a municipality in the Netherlands. Did they come to you knowing that this was pressing, or did you have to kind of build the case yourselves to do that kind of work?
Well, in this case, there was one crusader in the municipality of Apeldoorn who was he saw the goal that every municipality in the Netherlands has, which says that in 2030, 50% of the material streams need to be circular, and in 2050 that needs to be 100%. So he saw it coming, and he actually in this case went for funding outside of the municipality. So it wasn't necessarily directly funded by the municipality itself, not entirely at least. Yeah, and in that sense, it was still very hard within the municipality to get it going. But once it was going, and also to the point of how to get everyone along and how to make sure that people actually buy into this. In this case, was hooking everyone on, listening to them, even if it was just a rant about sustainability, listening to them and listening to what it is that does move them and how to get them going within the project. Admittedly, that was already when they were in the project and it was funded from outside. But it did help to get them along for the ride. And for them to feel heard, and for them also to have some sort of ownership at the end. Sure.
Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I challenge the question in a way. I'm not sure if we are the best, most skilled people to do that, to raise an issue at that level in the business. I would imagine right now you'll find that most organizations have some kind of goals and strategies, and the issue is more that, I guess the Remco's point is like, how do you connect those and actually make them happen? I think people, and how do you work with the kind of layers of the organization that we're more likely to be in with? So I would suggest that it's more about finding out what the intentions are. But like you said, there are these targets. The issue isn't really target setting; it's achieving targets and speed. So what are the targets? Where's the shortfall? But also, like how do you engage the people that you're working with to have that conversation, to start to think about it, not so much think about persuading people, but taking the time out to have the conversation? Because I still think, we compartmentalize, there's like day job and then there's this, and it's like, how do you break down that barrier and start to kind of, start that conversation, right? The most important thing we can do, the first most important thing we can do around the climate crisis is talk about it.
Sure. Okay. Any last half a minute response from anyone before we tie up?
I think we shouldn't underestimate that I have never met a bad person with bad intentions, but they were always in circumstances where they somehow couldn't align with what was actually in them. So if we can somehow create circumstances within companies where we can unlock this inertia of aligning with these sustainability development goals, then we are on a good track. And I think it's more about I don't think there's a lot of good in a lot of people, but they need a way to channel this within what they are doing. And sometimes the constructs that we have made that come from a different management paradigm don't allow for it, but it doesn't mean it's impossible.
Sure. Okay. I think it's a nice positive note to end on. So I'd like to thank Agusta for hosting this panel, and of course all the authors who are at the roundtable, and as well as the other contributors and the guest editors who you didn't see today, but who participated, and also Axia at the SDN who brought this issue to life. If this discussion piqued your interest, I'd like you to invite you and discover the full issue, which you can download or purchase at the SDN website. And lastly, if you're interested in the topic of measuring service experience, this is going to be the next issue of Touchpoint. Our call for papers is currently open, and we're looking for authors to submit articles. So on the topic of measuring service experience. Thank you on behalf of everyone who's here, and goodbye.
And we will restart both stages at the top of the hour. Thanks.
Thank you.